Finally, to complete the most significant news for this day, Y News continues. Here are the top stories. Daraga Albay Mayor Carlwin Baldo asserts his innocence, claiming that he did not order the killing of Ako Bicol Party List Representative Rodel Batocabe and his security detail SPO1 Orlando Diaz. During a press conference just hours before the PNP filed cases of double murder and frustrated murder against him, Baldo insisted that he was just being used as a convenient scapegoat and that the true killers of Batocabe and Diaz are still free. Baldo was tagged by the PNP as the mastermind in the murder of Batocabe, citing witnesses' accounts. Batocabe and Diaz were gunned down after a gift-giving event in Barangay Burgos in Daraga last December 22nd. Batocabe was one of the three candidates for mayoralty in Daraga in the 2019 midterm polls, including Baldo, who is seeking re-election.
I assert my innocence. Let us not forget that while I'm being used as convenient scapegoat, those who are truly responsible for the crime remain free and blameless. I am an easy target, but that does not make me guilty of the crime. I am already being persecuted in the courts of public opinion. A great injustice has been done, not only to Kong Batocabe and SPO2 Diaz, but also to their families, to the victims who were caught in the line of fire, and to the people of Daraga. But in our quest for justice, let us avoid committing injustice.
Meanwhile, the Department of Information and Communications Technology Acting Secretary Eliseo Rio Jr. claims the proposal on the common tower policy of the government is illegal and anti-competitive. Rio says the proposal drafted by Presidential Advisor for Economic Affairs and Information and Communications Technology, Ramon Jacinto, violates the legislative franchise of local telecommunication companies and may lead to potential court cases. Under the proposed draft, telcos will not be allowed to build their own towers, as this will only be limited to tower companies that will be chosen by the government. But Rio insists provision in the franchise of telcos can only be changed through an amendment of the law and not by any policy or even in an executive order from the president. Rio also says they will continue the dialogue with the 5 tower companies that express interest in building common towers, even if Jacinto asked him to refrain from commenting on the issue as a courtesy to incoming DICT Secretary Gringo Honasan.
Siguro pwede na i-set aside itong policy. Bakit hindi na lang kami or the DICT come up with MOU or Memorandum of Understanding with any potential tower co, no? May mga lima yung talagang nagbigay ng proposal, no?
The Commission on Population and Development is pushing for part-time jobs for senior citizens to help them have an extra source of income for their personal needs. Popcom says the proposal aims to uphold respect for the elderly and to prove that they are valuable talents in the Philippine workforce. The commission believes that encouraging senior citizens to work will also help them improve their health conditions. The agency also urges the government to create sustainable programs for the elderly, as their population is projected to reach 8.9 million this year. The Popcom says helping the senior citizens earn from a small business will also contribute to the country's economy.
Nakita namin sa pag-aaral, pag more than 60 years old ka, ang laki ng deficit mo, pambayad sa gamot, pambayad sa operasyon, o kung kailangan mong ma-hospital, maari kulang pa yung health insurance para ron. So magandang may part-time na opportunity ang senior citizens.
The number of bodies recovered from landslides and flash floods that hit Bicol region has risen to 105, nearly a week after the onslaught of Tropical Depression Usman. Reports from the Office of the Civil Defense showed that 30 of the fatalities were from Sagnay town in Camarines Sur that was hit by landslide, and at least 20 people are still reported missing. The provinces of Albay, Camarines Sur, Catanduanes, Sorsogon, and Masbate have already been placed under state of calamity. OCD also reports that several roads in the region are still not passable to vehicles as these are still covered with mud and loose soil. The Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH Region 5, says it may take 3 to 4 days before the clearing operations can be completed.
Well, hindi natin ma-penetrate totally kasi pwede yun kung talagang sabay-sabay natin, kung ma-airlift natin. Kaya lang, umasa lang tayo dito sa land base
In other news, President Rodrigo Duterte will not apologize for the controversial statements he made about molesting a maid to relate the abuse he suffered from a certain Catholic priest when he was still in high school. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo says the president's story was not degrading and was made up to dramatize the hypocrisy of some Catholic priests. Duterte's statements has drawn criticisms from several groups who believe that the president is sending a wrong message and that this might bring worse abuses against household workers abroad. But Panelo says critics and those who are ultra-conservative only find fault in Duterte's statements. The palace official adds that criticisms will not stop the president from making controversial remarks during his term.
Unang-una, hindi naman mahala yung kwento niya. Nagtatawanan nga eh. Alam mo, pag mahalay, ang reaksyon ng audience, masama. Magagalit sa kanya. If you notice, the president has been doing that, even during the campaign. And that has been very effective on the listeners. Klaro din yung mensahe. Kaya sa tingin ko, he will not stop at doing this. Kasi nakikita niyang effective, naiintindihan siya.
Meanwhile, an election lawyer believes that former President and now House Speaker Gloria Arroyo's acquittal from her electoral sabotage case in connection with the 2007 elections could jeopardize the upcoming midterm polls. Just before the year 2018 ended, the Pasay City Regional Trial Court acquitted Arroyo after the prosecution failed to prove the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt of manipulating the results of the election in favor of her party mates. But former Congressman Nery Colmenares, who also served as election lawyer in the 2007 midterm poll, says he is not convinced by the ruling.
As a lawyer, I witnessed a precinct in Maguindanao with 2,000 votes. Ang presinto noon, 200 to 300 lang botante, may 2,000 boto. Lalong maging matapang ngayon yung mga gustong mag-commit ng electoral fraud na gawin ito sa 2019. Kasi wala ang message dito, you can do the crime but not do the time.
Aside from the 2007 electoral sabotage case, Arroyo was also linked to the infamous Hello Garci scandal during the 2004 elections when she was running for president against the late Fernando Po Jr. Arroyo defeated Po, but the legitimacy of her presidency remained in question. And for the news abroad, here's Kath Dumaraos live from Bangkok, Thailand. Kath, good evening.
Good evening, William. Protests across the Indian state of Kerala turned violent after two women defied a centuries-old ban and entered a Hindu temple. This report tells us why. Protesters in Kochi, India set an effigy of Kerala State Chief Pinarayi Vijayan on fire, claiming he was at fault for encouraging women and girls to visit the Sabarimala Hill Shrine. Protesters also clashed with police and some were later detained. A video from a local police official on Wednesday showed two women inside the temple with their heads covered. It was not immediately clear how the women on this occasion managed to avoid devotees guarding the temple. Rights activist Trupti Desai, who in November last year was forced to return after she was blocked by protesters at Cochin International Airport in a failed attempt to reach the temple, termed the entry of the women as a historic win.
The entry of women in Sabarimala today is an historic win for us. It is a victory of the movement of equality, and it is a victory of women power. Because after the verdict of the Supreme Court, they were opposing, and today the protest has become unsuccessful as the women have entered there.
The Sabarimala temple was historically closed to women of menstruating age, defined as between 10 and 50. A Supreme Court decision in September 2018 overturned the ban, but protesters had stopped women from entering. Kat Dumaraos, UNTV News and Rescue. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo vows to continue working with Colombia amid increased production of coca. Jovic Burmas tells us why.
The United States is deeply concerned about an increase in coca cultivation in Colombia, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said on Wednesday. Pompeo met with Colombian President Ivan Duque on a brief visit to the coastal city of Cartagena.
We will continue to work with you, Mr. President, side by side, to achieve our joint objectives to cut coca cultivation and coca production by 50% between now and 2023. We know we must do our part to reduce demand in our country, and we'll work alongside you here as well.
Colombia has long been ranked as the world's top producer of cocaine, for which coca is the base ingredient. But figures compiled by the United Nations for 2017 showed the largest potential output since the organization began keeping records, with cocaine production at 1,379 metric tons. The government wants to eradicate 100,000 hectares of coca crops in 2019. Duque said last month that 2018 eradication would total more than 80,000 hectares of illicit crops. Duque and Pompeo also discussed the crisis in Venezuela, where hyperinflation and food and medicine shortages have spurred more than 3 million people to flee over the past several years, including more than 1 million who now live in Colombia. Pompeo commended Colombia for its support of Venezuelan migrants and said he and Duque discussed how to collaborate on aid with regional and international bodies.
Colombia has gone to great lengths to support approximately 1 million Venezuelans that live in Colombia today and who have fled the crisis because of the Maduro regime's authoritarian misrule.
The United States has placed sanctions on Venezuelans' debt and on some officials in Socialist President Nicolas Maduro's government, which it accuses of corruption and human rights violations. Maduro blames Venezuela's economic problems on U.S. sanctions and an economic war led by political adversaries. Jovic Burmas, UNTV News and Rescue.
Mexican authorities are urged to conduct a full investigation into the case of a newly installed mayor who was shot dead while on his way to a town hall meeting. Meanwhile, the United States questions Russia's move to detain a retired U.S. Marine in Moscow on spying charges. Eileen Cerudo tells us why.
In Mexico, a mayor in Mexico's southern state of Oaxaca was gunned down on Tuesday, just hours after he was sworn into office. According to reports, Alejandro Aparicio from the town of Chalhaco was killed whilst on his way to the town hall for a meeting. Another official injured in the attack later died of his injuries. A man has been arrested in connection with the killing, with authorities reportedly believing the suspect to be the only person linked to Aparicio's death. However, locals are calling for a full investigation into the murder, believing others to be involved. In Brazil, the United States wants an explanation on why Russia detained a retired U.S. Marine on spying charges in Moscow and will demand his immediate return if it determines his detention is inappropriate. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. government hoped to gain consular access to Paul Whelan within hours.
We've made clear to the Russians our expectation that we will learn more about the charges, come to understand what it is he's been accused of, and if the detention is not appropriate, we will demand his immediate return.
And in Syria, a convoy of Syrian Kurdish fighters has pulled out of the flashpoint area of Manbij in northern Syria, close to territory controlled by Turkey, Syria's defense ministry said on Wednesday. The ministry released video of dozens of vehicles traveling along an unmade road carrying armed fighters, some waving the flags of the Kurdish-led People's Protection Unit's militia and its female counterpart, the YPG. The YPG is the strongest element in the Syrian Defense Forces, a coalition of militias that the United States has backed in its campaign against Islamic State, helping it capture swaths of North and East Syria. According to information given by the ministry, approximately 400 Kurdish fighters have left Manbij so far. Eileen Cerudo, UNTV, News and Rescue.
And those are the news from the other parts of the globe. Back to you, William.
Thank you very much, Kath Dumaraos, live from Bangkok, Thailand. Three-time major winner Andy Murray gets outplayed by Russian Daniil Medvedev in a match in Brisbane. Meanwhile, the family of seven-time Formula One world champion Michael Schumacher assures fans that he is in the very best of hands as they prepare to celebrate his 50th birthday. Here's why from Asher Kadapan Jr.
Andy Murray's hope of winning a third Brisbane International title came to an end as he was beaten in straight sets by Russian Daniil Medvedev in the second round match on Wednesday. Murray was outplayed by the 22-year-old as he went down 7-5, 6-2 in just over 80 minutes. Medvedev was playing in his first tournament since September but had too much power for his opponent, whilst Murray was at times visibly frustrated and appeared to limp at points during the match. The three-time major winner is currently ranked 240 in the world and admitted this week that he does not know how long he will be able to continue playing tennis. Meanwhile, Bulgaria's Grigor Dimitrov and Frenchman Jeremy Chardy knocked out home players John Millman and Nick Kyrgios respectively on Wednesday at the second round of the Brisbane International ATP 250 tournament. Dimitrov took his game in straight sets after being aided by a better service game than his opponent. Both players lost a number of service games in the second set, but the Bulgarian world number 19 stood firm to secure a spot in the second quarterfinals against Japan's Kei Nishikori, who beat American Denis Kudla in his second round match. Later, Chardy came back from a set down to beat Kyrgios and set up a clash against Japan's Yasutaka Uchiyama. The family of stricken seven-time Formula One world champion Michael Schumacher have assured fans the Ferrari great is being well cared for as they prepare to celebrate his 50th birthday on Thursday. Schumacher, who retired from racing in 2012, has not been seen in public since he suffered severe head injuries in a skiing accident 5 years ago. The German is being cared for at home in Switzerland. Schumacher remains the sports world's most successful driver with a record 91 Grand Prix wins. Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue.
NASA releases new photos of Ultima Thule, the most distant celestial body in the solar system that its mission has ever probed. Meanwhile, China makes a historic space exploration after its robotic spacecraft landed on the dark side of the moon. Mon Hokson tells us why.
NASA's New Horizons mission sent home close-up images of Ultima Thule, a 32-kilometer-long space rock in the uncharted heart of the Kuiper Belt. The belt is a ring of icy celestial bodies just outside Neptune's orbit.
Here's where we were just a couple days ago on December 31st, 2018. This was humanity's best image of Ultima Thule, made by New Horizons at a range of about 500,000 kilometers out. Well, that image is so 2018. Meet Ultima Thule. Just like with Pluto, we could not be happier. What you're seeing is the first contact binary ever explored by spacecraft.
The images, taken on January 1, 2019, show a rock in the shape of a snowman. The images were taken from a distance of 28,000 kilometers, 30 minutes before the spacecraft made its closest approach to the rock. Launched in January 2006, New Horizons embarked on its 4 billion-mile journey toward the solar system's edge to study the dwarf planet Pluto and its 5 moons. Now, 1.6 billion kilometers beyond Pluto for its second mission into the Kuiper Belt. New Horizons will study the makeup of Ultima Thule's atmosphere and terrain in a months-long study to seek clues about the formation of the solar system and its planets. Meanwhile, China says it has successfully landed a robotic spacecraft on the far side of the moon, the first ever such attempt and landing. State media say that at 10:26 Beijing time, the unmanned Chang'e 4 probe touched down in the South Pole Aitken Basin, carrying instruments to characterize the region's geology, as well as a biological experiment. State media called the landing a major milestone in space exploration. The probe has sent some first pictures from the surface, but with no direct communications link possible. All pictures and data are first sent to a separate satellite and then relayed from there to Earth. Monhok Son, UNTV News and Rescue.
And those are the reasons behind the news, January 3, 2019. On behalf of Rheena, Villamor-Camara, and Angelo Castro III, I am William Thio. Because we need to know, we will always ask why. Good evening.
UNTV, your public service channel.